morning, Team Transcom. Wow, so what a fantastic day. Today culminates a lot of work on behalf of the team to put together this initiative. And our goal is, moving forward, is to every quarter we'll have this speaker series. And I thought, how best to kick off the speaker series and to kick it off with the senior advisor to the chairman, who is the one that's really driving journalistic professional development with the J7 staff. And so, again, I want to thank you all for being here. I want you to, one, remember we have a all call this afternoon. So let's make sure from a question perspective, we focus on journalistic professional development in this forum and this afternoon at the all call. That will be a little bit more, I can assure you, direct. If you haven't heard SEAC speak before, he's a very honest and transparent professional. I would just say that to you, all right? So with that, please stand by. Jan Hut, it is my honor to introduce the Commander, U.S. Transportation Command, General Van Ovos.
Good morning, everybody. Have your seats. All right, all right. Hey, it's great to see so many folks today, and we have lots more folks out there in their virtual land. What a great opportunity we have here today to meet and talk to the SEAC. Wow. As we kick off this leadership speaker series, first of all, it's my honor to be here to see you. First of all, it's great to see a bunch of people in the same room. And two, to be talking about development, specifically enlisted development, right? The core of our military here. And it is so important. I also want to thank Fleet Myrick for putting this together. This was his vision to come together, and I think it's absolutely key when we think about how we develop leaders into our future. So, you know, our PME and your PME within your services have adapted over the years, but there's really nothing more important than understanding joint integration and the development of our joint leaders. I say that why? Because when we get onto the battlefield, we have to quickly assemble and work as a team to achieve our objectives, right? And with the rapidly changing character of war and the shifting character of logistics, right? There's going to be a higher demand on you as enlisted leaders around the force. So it's really, really important that we think about and we stretch ourselves when it comes to joint development and how do we employ and how do we integrate joint power, not just military power, but whole of nation power, right? All of the instruments of war. How do we use all of them? And you'll be hearing things like integrated deterrence, which is not merely military. It's how do we blend in better? How do we work better to achieve our objectives as a nation? So here we are, the series, Developing Enlisted Leaders for Tomorrow's Wars, and no better than the SEAC, Colon Lopez, to start us off. So, airman, leader, special operations warrior, 4th senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, your senior most enlisted leader in our military. Now, if you hadn't had a chance to look at his resume, it's quite replete. And so I asked that you really take a look. He's done a lot of good things, and surprisingly, he started out just like one of us. And of course, his mindset really makes him the right person and his time to really explain why this is important to you. So I asked that, you know, while you're listening to him, I know, and I've actually heard that you all have challenged him, some of our junior enlisted challenged him in a few questions. Really think about what he's talking about. Really think about joint service integration, and maybe think about, you know, as he's talking to you, you know, what's the risk of not doing this, right? What are the risks of me looking down and in and staying functionally aligned only and not looking up and out? What's the risk for what I do, and what's the risk for the joint force? And maybe ask him how his experiences in training have allowed him to give advice to the senior-most leaders of our military. And what might have happened, perhaps, had he not had those kinds of backgrounds and experiences. Now, look, we are the most capable military in the world. But times are changing, right? We've got to sharpen right? We got to think more about integration and being joint. When I think about strategic competition and great power competition, we have to look back into into World War II to think about the kinds of conflicts that we had then and the consequences and what it means for our future, right? So it's a really, really important. So I want to say thank you to SEAC Colon Lopez for doing this, and I am sticking around because this is the most important part of my day is learning from this team. So ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for SEAC Colon Lopez. SEAC.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, first of all, good morning, and it's really an honor to be here to be able to talk to you about joint development, because my journey as a joint operator began right when I was getting promoted to E5, and that was when I first got assigned to the Joint Special Operations Command, and I got fully immersed into the Joint Purple Machine. Now, one of the key things that I figure out fairly quick is that if you're trying to become joint, you're likely to fail. And the reason for that is because you start acting in a way that is not natural to you. What I saw as a successful tactic was to understand the joint environment and to be able to operate within your talents and your true self in a construct that might be foreign to you at times. So much for the opening comments. Fleet, thank you so much for the invite, and over to you.
Morning, sir. Master on Campo, I work in J2 here. With your comments on developing a joint leader, is there any concrete plans in place to create a joint professional military education in a junior level, much like a service PME? If so, if that is happening, I would hope that it would be recognized by all services and maybe not a swap for like ALS or something like that, but something that all services recognize as a joint leader.
So the answer is yes, and it's called Gateway. As a matter of fact, we're rolling the pilot out early 2022. And the conversation began right here on the right side on the left side of the slide as you're looking at it. And we wanted the services to have enough time to go ahead and create this entity before we started injecting some heavy joint education in there. What we came up as a sweet spot is C6, because that is when members are transitioning. They know enough about their service and their culture to where we're pretty comfortable that everything else is going to add value and not going to go ahead and take away from that basic understanding. So along with the service senior enlisted advisors, we decided to create a course like Keystone that is 2 weeks in residence and also available online for people to start learning about that construct that I talked about, government, the oath, the Constitution, and all of those things, and understanding how the joint machine works. So that course is being rolled out as we speak. The joint policy is being signed this week by the director of the joint staff, and ultimately it's going to be put in place. So we got all of the tools ready and set to go ahead and roll out that pilot. Now, who gets to go to the in-residence versus the online version of the course? The online is open to anybody, all right? And we're going to track the people that go through it. But the service senior enlisted advisors are going to nominate people like we do Keystone to be able to go ahead and fill the seats per year. And I think we're going to have 2, maybe 4 classes per year in residence. So that's going to be 2 weeks over at NDU, and it's going to be just a deeper dive at the learnings of what you get from the online course. So the answer is yes, because we saw that as a big gap right now, that we're waiting too long. When people get to go to Keystone, you typically have about 25 years in service, and that's too late. So we needed to go ahead and hit them right around the 15-year in service mark in order to go ahead and start getting that education in there. Good questions, thank you.
Hey, good morning, Chief. Major Yates from front office. I've got a kind of a comment question, take it for what it is, but I actually really agree with your statement on the concept of conventional warfare and where we're headed, given the fact that technology is making those standoff distance further and further. But when we think of modernization, one of the issues I noticed, and this kind of goes across the board, is that we have a lot of institutional barriers that get in the way of getting after what, the Chief of Staff just said it at ATA, and Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force said the same thing about we've got to get after modernization, we've got to do these things. But what I lack is the how. What's the how at the AO level that I could look at to get through some of these things? Because when we look at, combatant command to component, and then you look across the services, we've got a lot of barriers in between that are very deeply rooted, that a lot of us at the level that are trying to get after it need some help on the how. So I'm hoping we can get a little bit of that out of the talk today, Chief.
Well, so on the how, in order to modernize, you have to divest. And one of the biggest problems our nation has is that we like to hold on to stuff, legacy stuff, and there's going to come a time to where you're not going to have enough room in the garage to go ahead and properly maintain and sustain everything that you have. So that is one of the biggest barriers that we have. And a lot of that comes from constituencies. People sometimes don't want to let go of things because it's going to affect the particular piece of America. We need to be better at that. Just go ahead and draw the line. By this day, we're going to go ahead and get rid of X in order to move to that. The other thing that we do is, and this is my opinion, we overinvest in certain things. And deterrence is important, but sometimes we have to go ahead and make sure that we balance that budget and modernize not only the weapon systems, but also the human weapon system. What is it that we need to do with our current human pool when it comes to contractors, civilians, and military entities to go ahead and make them more lethal? I was recently having a conversation with Dr. Mara Carlin, and the conversation was about the National Defense Strategy, which we're about to roll out here early next year. And she asked me, what do you think is one of the best things that we can do when we roll out on this strategic power competition? And I talked to her about the balance between the three grays. Gray number one is the gray area that we're going to operate, and we just talked at length about the uncertainty of warfare. The second thing is the integrated deterrence that the National Defense Strategy is asking for, and that is the gray steel, the things that we need to buy, the visible force projection that our enemies need to see. And the last one, and in my opinion, the most important one, is the investment in the gray matter of our people. How is it that we're going to go ahead and empower the humans that make those things lethal? And how is it that we're going to empower humans to not only act on the military side of things, but also help on the diplomatic side? Help building partnerships to increase access. Help partners to be autonomous when it comes to protecting their own turf. How is it that we're going to go ahead and continue to invest in that human interaction that eventually is going to build the relationships to create strength in numbers to go after any adversary? So that is the balance of the three grays. So there's a lot of reform that needs to take place, and a lot of it is being discussed right now. General Hyten is being very vocal that we need to break the system that we have and come up with something new because what we have doesn't work. The conversation with General Van Ovos here recently in the office call was on the same subject. What is it that we need to do different? We just need to revolutionize the way that we do business when it comes to acquisition, and also the balance that we need in those three areas to be able to be more combat effective, sir. So thank you for that question. We got First Sergeant over here has got some questions.
Good morning, SEAC. Thanks again for coming. So quick question for you in regards to the gateway that you mentioned. So how's credit going to work for that? And the reason I ask, probably the deeper question is there a push? In my 2.5 years here at Transcom, one of the things that I notice is every service looks at joint service different in terms of how credibility within their service goes once they go back. So my question for this, specifically for Gateway, how is there a push to try to flatten that to where each service looks at that? And I know from your perspective, it's probably more of an influence, but is there a push to get the services to all give the same street cred, I guess you would say, for folks that go to that course?
So thank you, Shert, for that question, and that it goes back to the left side of the slide. One of the biggest problems that we have had, specifically on the enlisted side, when it comes to the creation of purple doctrine, purple expectations, purple education practices, is that it was done in a vacuum. And a lot of times, the stakeholders, basically the feeders, the Title 10 responsibility, man, train, and equip personalities were not included in that decision-making process. When I assumed my responsibility as the fourth SEAC, that was the first thing that I did. Collaboration without encroachment. And that was to have an open forum with all of them present, the service senior enlisted advisors, to see what will be of most benefit to the force. So from the moment we start mixing it in the bowl, from the moment it comes out of the oven fully baked, every single one of them is fully versed on why is it that we're doing certain things. So to answer your question, yes, it's vetted through them, and by the time we go ahead and roll it out, it's going to be recognized across the force, just like Keystone is recognized across the force for senior enlisted leaders. So that is our intent. And everything else that we push, if you saw the vision for professional military education, joint professional military education, it had all of their signatures for that same reason, to show the force that every single one of them is a stakeholder. Somebody asked, well, how come it wasn't the service chiefs? Because the enlisted signature really has no weight because you have no authorities. Well, it was the Joint Chiefs that actually say, no, it should be your signatures because the force needs to see that this is coming from you and that you briefed us that this is not our idea. You guys created this, and this is based on the needs of the enlisted force, and you guys own it. So we are in a very good place when it comes to the transparency that it takes to create the right course to make sure that we get the right credit for it. And that is deliberate in nature. You know, we're not throwing spaghetti at a wall. So, yes, ma'am.
Good morning, SEAC. Chief Petty Officer Hobie from the SG. Thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to be here. So my question is a follow-up to the initial question. We have had a lot of individuals, a lot of sailors who come here straight from boot camp. They have not had service integration nor joint integration, and this is a whole new world to them. So how do you foresee in the future handling their initial accession into the joint environment when they haven't even had their service integration as of yet?
And I'll point back that to that one, because we have you here. We have Fleet Myrick. I see many Navy uniforms here. We have size over here. So just because they're not going to a Navy per unit, we have a Navy component on every combatant command. And it is our responsibility to account for those young men and women when they come into us. We need to make sure that we take the extra effort to still make them sailors. And they're going to have an advantage if we do this right, because you're going to be teaching them how to be sailors. And as a matter of fact, I saw a CPO selectee somewhere around, probably in this group. But there's certain things that you continue to do because it is what you do as a sailor. And they need to see that. They need to see the leadership visible, passing that on to them. At the same time, the things that they're not learning on paper because they're learning to be sailors, they're experiencing by reporting for duty every day. And you need to balance that to make sure that they don't tip too far left or right when it comes to joint versus learning how to become a sailor. But again, it is our responsibility to account for every single action that shapes the way that they think. Because I'll tell you that the most repetitive feedback that I get from those young service members that come into the joint construct is that somebody's whispering in their ear, well, you're screwed because, you know, you came into joint and the Navy's going to forget about you. The Air Force says the same thing. The Army says the same thing. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true because this is an opportunity. The same thing was said to me when I went to JSOC as an E4, E5. It's like, well, you know, you're screwed because the Air Force is going to forget about you. Look at me now. So, I mean, seriously. But there are people out there, naysayers, that will come, you know, with problems without solutions. But every single one of you is capable to just go ahead and take that young sailor and just shape them into the best sailor they can be with an early start on the purple environment. So I see it as an opportunity, not necessarily as a challenge. Yeah. What else, gang? Uh-oh.
Morning, Chief. You knew I was going to say something. My question is, what part does preparing to operate in a coalition environment with allies and partners fit into joint PME? And I'm of course speaking to your work in your last assignment, and I know the importance that you place in connecting senior enlisted leaders across the globe.
So I have to say this first. So Dr. Mason and I have a long history because we work together in a lot of initiatives working a very complex problem on professionalizing enlisted forces in the continent of Africa. And this here actually piggybacks to the enlisted development strategy that we develop in Africa. Because every single system that we're implementing right now has partners in mind. And there's going to be some international partners. It starts with Five Eye partners because of certain classification levels. But what we want to do eventually is just go ahead and break the barriers in Keystone and Gateway to be able to go ahead and take more of those partners to come in. And in the case that we cannot do that because of certain systems, what we want to do is have an alternate course that we can bring to them and still be effective in educating them on the way that we do things and not trying to make them like us, but provide the kind of option for them to see what's within your span of responsibility and capability that we can enable you or at least coach you to be better at what you do, which is exactly what we did with the Africans. There wasn't a single country in Africa that we went in thinking that we needed to make them exactly like us. The first question that I asked the Chief of Defense or the Minister of Defense was, what is it that you want to do with your enlisted forces? Then we took a history stroll on the history of coups on the continent. What has this country, this particular nation, done before that eroded the trust and confidence of them, and they ended up, arming themselves against you? How do we prevent that from happening? So getting at the culture, the capabilities, and then what is it that you need them to do? All right, peacekeeping operations. Okay, roger that. We have an app for that. What is it that you need to do? We need to be international partners, going to Somalia. All right, we can work that too. So again, tailor approaches to every single partner just to go ahead and continue to increase the confidence in them, because that was a strategic power competition problem. The Chinese were spending a lot of money. We didn't have that much money to spend, but we brought capability to them, and we became a very trusty partner. And we used to call them the Chinese were kind of like the boyfriend with a lot of money. They'll buy you everything. They'll buy you the fancy dinners, a fancy ring, and everything else. But in the end, they're going to treat you like crap. We're the poor ones that, man, we may give you a mediocre cubic zirconia, but we're going to treat you like a queen, We're going to treat you good, and it's going to be lifelong lasting. It's not going to be until the next one comes about, and then we move on because we have money and we have options. So, but just that basic understanding on relationship, when we talk about intellect and emotional intelligence, really plays off. It plays out, and it pays off in the end when it comes to relationship building with them. But thank you, Dr. Mason, for that question.
Good morning, SEAC. Master Leach from JCSE. My question pertaining to the Gateway program, at least within the Air Force side, I haven't seen a lot of selections for sister service PME courses dedicated to those selected to be in a joint assignment. With the Gateway program, will there be any sort of a preference for those members who have been selected to serve in a joint capacity?
And the answer is yes. So those are the members in discussion with the Service Senior Enlisted Advisors and the National Guard Bureau. That's the priority, the people that are already residing in the joint machine. Because, it will be almost like just-in-time education or prior to assignment that we go ahead and give you a glimpse of what is about to come. And it's just rational to go ahead and do that, and it sets you up for success when you come in. So the answer is yes. People in joint billets or going into joint billets will have priority, and then the services go ahead and highlight potential personnel, i.e. AFSCs, as in the Air Force, like intelligence, special operations, that are habitual members of the joint machine to be able to educate them. But yes. And for everyone, like I said, it's going to be available online, and you'll be able to take the course if you want it. And I promise it's not going to be as much of a pain as Senior Enlisted Joint PME 1 and 2. All right? As a matter of fact, we want to divest of some of that stuff of Senior Enlisted Joint PME 1 and 2, and we want to make it more digestible and more user-friendly for you to be able to at least understand. Because right now it's just a click and drill, right? You just want to get through it. I decided to make it no longer a requirement for Keystone to have that course to come in because, you know, people are just going through the motions and it's taking too much time. But what we did is we gave them a reading assignment of certain documents that we want them to read, starting with the Constitution, you know. And by the time they set foot in the NDU on day one, they got to be ready to go ahead and have the conversations. They got to understand titles and authorities, the way the government works, you know, the role of the senior enlisted leader, which we wrote a paper. We have a lot of focus papers out there on the joint environment, on how we operate. And every single one of them is just lesson learned from us. And it keeps getting updated every so often just to keep it relevant for every single one of you. But we want to put the right information out there in a digestible way to make sure that it's a benefit of you. One right here.
SEAC, thanks for being here. Sergeant Porden, Transcom J6. I'm going to piggyback off the sister service EPME. I was looking at the FY22 quotas, and it looks like there's only about 100 opportunities for airmen to go out to sister service senior enlisted PMEs. And that was out of like 1,700 slots total for senior NCOA, so that's less than 6%. Have you guys talked about increasing that number, or do you think it's good where it's at? I'm asking because when I went through senior NCOA, I had a Coast Guardsman in my class, and that was my first experience in 15 years of being on a joint team, and it was an incredible experience. And then obviously getting to come here with the sailors, soldiers, Marines, it was very beneficial to have that at that point in my career.
Yeah, so great question. And the one thing that I want us to keep in mind is that those quotas are driven by the demand of that specific service and the seats that they have. Sometimes if they don't have enough sailors to go to the Senior Chief Academy, then they open up more seats for people to go, and then they go ahead and put the call out for that. But an increase above that, so a 6% so that you put out there, those are the seats that I can actually say, yeah, if you have somebody to go, then you have that seat. And then if somebody else is interested, because we always have a primary and an alternate, right? So if the alternates want to actually come in and they have seats, then we can potentially push them in there. And it's good to an extent to go ahead and get that education, but I will tell you that the Air Force is very reluctant to send anybody to the Sergeant's Major Academy. Why? Because it's 9 months long, you know? And a lot of people are like, I don't think I want to go ahead and do that. Go for, 8 weeks and we'll call it good. You know, when it comes to some of the other service academies, when I was the 18th Wing Command Chief in Okinawa, Japan, I built a relationship with Sergeant Major Moorfield, and we were going back and forth with PME. Marines were coming to the Air Force PME, they'll laugh, and then we'll send airmen to the Air Force, to the Marine Corps PME. As a matter of fact, Carissa, one of your chiefs over here that is right now filling in, she went over there and she ended up getting the Gung Ho Award, the top graduate at the Marine Corps Advanced Course. So, we were sending the right people to the right places. And that education that she received in there, man, it's invaluable. And that credibility that we talked about, man, she got a lot of points out there for what she did, because she went as a dark horse, an underdog, and then she came out on top. So again, we just got to continue to make sure that we maximize every opportunity, not because the institution is giving you slot, but that was an internal thing to the 18th Wing and communication with my peer, just talking about how many people we can go ahead and send to each other's courses. So again, the opportunities are out there, and just because it's not a quota driven by the hierarchy in the institution, we can make it work in other ways. So if you have a troop that is interested in going to any particular PME, man, there's a way to work around that. No.
Good morning, SEAC. Sergeant First Class Sarah here with the J33 current operation. My question is, it's more towards future warfare, because everyone keeps telling us we're going to pass the torch to you guys, and that's a big concern for me. So my question is, do you guys have anything about closing the gap between officers and enlisted, either going to the same action officer courses as them, if they're expecting us to understand and be able to give them what they need when we get here? I don't want to be on the job training. I want to be able to already been working with them, understanding what the briefs are. So is there anything that we could close the gap as well? Because if we're the backbone, that means the expectations is only going to get higher. And a lot of us have degrees like master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, so we could possibly integrate prior to coming to these organizations. I don't know if that's something you guys talk about, SEAC.
Well, part of the PME reform was to get after that particular issue to where, in my opinion, the opinion of the service senior enlisted advisors, some of our teaching mechanisms were too basic in order to match what a senior enlisted advisor at the 07, 08 level needed to understand. Now, two things that you need to have when you're a senior enlisted leader and you're an advisor to a commander, and that is access and empowerment. Access is nothing more to the information that that flag officer or that officer knows and the decisions that they need to make for the organization. Empowerment is the ability for that officer to not only give you access to those programs and be in the briefing so that you can process information, but to go out there and autonomously translate that message to the force, which is a key enabler when it comes to buying into what the organization is doing. The problem that we had in the past is that many senior enlisted leaders just basically couldn't get out of the first sergeant mindset. Boot shines, haircut, cigarette butts, square your uniform away, very basic. And when the problems will come about and a mission will come, they wouldn't even be in the room, adding value to the conversation. Now you need to be, if you're gonna be in the room, you need to be well informed, well briefed, and well prepared, because you're there to add value, not time, or to occupy space. When that officer looks at you and said, Chief, Senior Chief, Sergeant Major, do you have anything else to add? Something has to be there, no, everything has been briefed. And there's gonna be times that that's gonna happen, but not every time. An example of that is that I'm the only enlisted member that is physically in the tank when the Joint Chiefs decisions are being made. Now, I have access to every single meeting, but there's a lot of them that I don't need to be there because the information that they're discussing at certain times does not pertain to the enlisted force. So I'm not just there to occupy space. But if they're gonna be talking about something that's gonna affect the total force, and I need to start working on the narrative with this particular group here to make sure that you guys get it as advertised and that you know the details on how the decision came to be, then yes, I will be there. And then I'll be transparent with the chairman. I will tell him, hey, so this is what I got from the meeting. This is the way that I shaped the conversation. I'm going to go ahead and push forward. Do you agree with this, sir? And then I go ahead and move it forward. But we need to be synchronized when it comes to that. Now, education, like officers, so the war colleges have opened up for enlisted. We had a couple of issues because by law, that funding was for officer training only. And we have worked around certain things to be able to do that. The gunny that is with me, Gunny Gutierrez, she's getting ready to go to Naval Postgrad because of the duties that she's gonna take as a master guns. So we're already doing that. It is a matter of making sure that we identify the opportunity. The Joint Warfighter course also is another, officer level course that we opened up for enlisted, and the services nominate. But can you believe that it's a pretty long course, and the Marine Corps and the Air Force have been the only ones sending people out there. Some of the other services have not. But it's open, it's available. It's a matter of making sure that you come forward and express your interest. And I'm the sign-off authority to make sure that we get people in those courses. So again, if you're interested, or if you got soldiers here in your rank and file that are interested, let me know, and we'll facilitate that. What else, Dan? We got two, and then we got Sir back there.
Good morning, SEAC, Senior Chief Constantino with the J2. My question, because obviously Navy is deep in history and tradition, and every major operation usually has lessons learned or an after action. So I would ask you, what is the most significant lessons learned that you have taken through your time with the Joint Force, and how can we learn from something maybe you have learned so that we don't repeat something that has been done before?
Well, Senior Chief, it just so happens that we were talking about this lesson learned at breakfast this morning. And I've seen it in the way that we interact with partners. I've seen it in the way that we interact with some of our sister services. And most recently, it manifested on the way that we ended up finishing our chapter in Afghanistan. And one of the biggest failures that we have, and I use the African example, is that we went in certain countries trying to make people train and think and do things like us. when we're heavily reliant in technology. And I'll give you 2 examples. A special operations component went into a certain African country wanting to teach the Africans how to military free fall. That is skydiving. Why? Because it will be cool to jump in Africa. Same group trying to teach Africans how to use the LAR-5 rebreathing system for dive operations. And that is the clandestine small tank that has no bubbles in it. Why? So you start peeling that back and you look at, all right, so let's take out the LAR-5 example. So typically you have a GS-15 and about 2 GS-13s and a score about 2 GS-9s that maintain that dive locker. Can Africans do that? Second question, which is the most common one. What the hell do they have to sneak up on that they need, bubble-less systems? We were only doing it because it was cool for us to do it. The same with the free fall problem. Who's going to maintain that Perloff? It's life-saving equipment, and they didn't have the capability. They could barely store food in their foreshops. Oh, and by the way, they didn't have any damn planes to go ahead and jump out of. So why are we doing that? In Afghanistan, we try to train to technology. The Afghans couldn't sustain that, specifically in our maintenance practices and many other things. And the reason we needed advisors was to make sure that we kept coaching them to try develop habits. But the biggest failure that I saw there personally is that we tried to make them look like us. We need to get out of that habit. Again, we need to look at the specific capabilities that they have, what their country's allowing them to do, and then flex that method to do that. We must never do that again. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and create the next stage for failure. So that's my take. Sir?
Hi, I'm a civilian. My name is Jeff Brown. I'm part of J1. My question, because we mentioned working with foreign partners, the doctor did, as well as something education-wise that transfers with all the services. We talked about emotional intelligence and working abroad. What extent is foreign language in there?
So the services each has got their own cell that actually takes existing language capabilities and test personnel. I know for the Air Force, we call it LEAP. And those particular entities, some officers, the majority enlisted, get employed on a normal basis to be able to go ahead and serve as translators during conference and so on. And we have great success for that. I mentioned Gonna Gutierrez earlier, so she's got to go and learn French because her next post is going to be in Europe. So she's going to be working mostly European and African things. So the language capabilities programs are still going to continue to execute as we have in the past. Now, how they're employed in the strategic power competition construct is going to be on that line of effort that talks about building partnerships and allies to make sure that you have people that are able to go ahead and go abroad and continue to go ahead and increase the influence that the Department of Defense bring forward when it comes to building up their particular militaries or capabilities. So do you have any concerns about not doing enough, or we need to go ahead and ramp up our game? Any specific on the language piece?
To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure what you do to begin with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we do have that capability out there, and you'll be amazed at the languages that we have in our inventory right now,
Yep.
Speaking just from the Air Force. But it is amazing what they can do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, when we were having the issues in Syria, at the CAOC, under General Brown, I was the senior enlisted leader, we had daily communications with the Russians. 2 out of 3 linguists, one an A1C, the other one a staff sergeant. And then the officer was a captain. That's how amazing they are. Talking to the Russians themselves every day. What else, Ken? I'm not a T-Rex. If you don't move, I still see you, So like, yes, ma'am.
Good morning, SEAC. I'm Sergeant Osel from the J2. My question is, we have a lot of civilians that we work with, and I know we have every other component up there, but will there be a DoD component to this training at all?
A DoD component to this training.
Like for on the civilian side, I think at least for me personally, I find it easier to work with other service members versus necessarily understand civilians in the same way. Like I feel like they have more difficulty understanding like evaluations and that kind of processes.
Okay, so yeah, that gets then into the supervisory position realm, which is an expectation when they get their position description. And it is incumbent upon the organization that actually hired them to make sure they have the proper training to do that. Now, if it's a retired Air Force person that is actually now taking care of soldiers, I will expect that that service element, senior NCO, will go ahead and sit down with that civilian and go ahead and go through the left and right limits of what they need to do on that expectation. But we cannot think that civilians are going to come in cold and understand how to do that. Because what happens then, if the senior NCOs are not involved, educating our civilians on the process, then that civilian is just going to say, hey, here, write your own report because I just want to make sure that I don't screw you out of something. And then you end up writing your own report, which is actually detrimental to you. Because that is the difference between a mirror and a message. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. A mirror is if you write your own report, which is illegal, by the way, you shouldn't be doing that, is that you never wake up in the morning and tell yourself that you're ugly. Even if you are, you find some good quality about you that's like, I have a chance, right? That is what you do when you write your own report. You over-embellish. You want to make sure that you don't say anything, because nobody likes to say anything negative about themselves. The value of having a message is an outside entity looking at you for what you're doing and the experience and your actions. And then they write a message that everybody else understands. I will tell you, in 31 years of doing this, I can tell who's written their own report and who had it written by somebody else. When you read a report that is written by somebody else, the first thing that you think of is like, this isn't strong enough. But if I were to put them both side by side, I will put more value in the one that was written by somebody else because it's telling me something. It's not self-promoting, selling yourself to be able to go ahead and get whatever it is that you perceive that you need to get. But when it comes to civilians that are in supervisory positions, that's what I would recommend, is just to have that conversation with the senior enlisted for that particular element to make sure that they do not get it wrong because people's careers are at stake. But we also need to teach courage and honesty when it comes to that, to not overinflate those reports, engage people on their own merit. But thank you for that. It's something critical. And the reason I'll tell you this because that's something that I used to do with the civilians that were in supervisory positions when I was a senior enlisted leader for those organizations.
So, SEAC, I think we got time for one more question.
All right, First Sergeant. Who's going to give me the last dance?
Good morning, SEAC. Sergeant Laughter speaking from AMC. Just had a question on their outcomes, where it says possesses the ability to look up and out while simultaneously remaining focused on the down and in. Can you share with us a time in your career where you may have had a moment where you were possibly thinking about, hanging it up or, where you faced a challenge through your career?
I'm sorry, when you were thinking about?
Or just like sometimes most people will go through their career and then they are like, I'm done, or they'll face something in their career. Is there something you can share with us?
I mean, this has been recorded, so I have to be careful. Now, I'll give you two examples. So when I first came in, I joined the service for discipline and structure in my life. My first assignment as a 19-year-old single airman was in Crete, Greece, and I almost got kicked out of the Air Force. And it was almost like, you guys seen the movie Deuce Bigalow? When he takes that girl to the baseball game because she's got Tourette's, it was a place that she needed to fit in. That's what they did with me in special operations. I just had too much energy, and I needed to go ahead and let that out. So once they made me a PJ, I was happy. That was my purpose in life. But there came a time, and I was assigned to the pararescue school under Education and Training Command, and I became overly frustrated there was a lot of backstabbing, a lot of lack of support from leadership, and a lot of finger pointing based on the faults of others, and I was about to hang it up. And it took one chief, the pararescue functional manager, to say, hey, this too shall pass. Those people don't last forever, all right? You need to continue to do right by the troops, make sure that you continue training pararescuemen because we're at war. You cannot turn your back on them. But yeah, I was this close to just going to the reserves at that one particular time. And I have been in about 17 years at that time. And that's how bad it got to where, and I won't go into the details of the things that occurred during that time, but I was this close for punching somebody in the face. And yeah, I almost lost my professionalism. I almost threw all my credibility away because I let people get to me. And thanks to Chief Ryan Beckman that actually talked me off the ledge and actually allowed me an opportunity to serve you still to this day. But those times are gonna come. And you just need to take a knee, drink some water, and go ahead and reassess your situation, all right? Just don't let him get to you. And the last thing I will tell you in that, never, never carry yourself throughout your career with a chip on your shoulder. I could barely speak English when I first came into service, all right? And people made fun of it. Some people ended up, just like, oh yeah, you're never gonna do anything because of X. When I went into pararescue, I was told, your kind doesn't make it through this training because there were no Latinos in it. A lot of different things. And I was just like, well, I'll show you. And I have a similar story as somebody else that is sitting right here in front of you. Somebody that got told no several times. But it's all about you guys. You just got to go ahead and prove yourself. Show them what you got, and you'll see where that takes you. So, but again, quitting is never an option. As a matter of fact, I used to slap a sign every day, pararescue training, never quit. So that is right here, man. So.
Thanks, SEAC. So with that, I think we're done with this. But I just want to take a quick second to thank everybody for coming. This has been absolutely outstanding. The fact that we got you here is absolutely awesome. We really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. Ma'am, thank you for the opening comments. Fleet, thank you as well. But again, we're going to be doing this on a monthly basis, something to this effect. So we really appreciate you coming. We look forward to having you in future events and appreciate the support. But with that.
All right. Thank you, team.